Hello, this is Clorin, and I'm going to be reading to you the final chapter of Slenderotica by Jen Harker. You could buy it off of Amazon for $6.99. It's in the Kindle store. The particular chapter I'm going to be reading is called Such a Slender Carress. It's not safe for work, so make sure you're not around small children or sitting in work while you're listening to this. In case anybody was wondering about the kind of content I will be reading, it is orgies, all consensual, sounds a little bit rapey at times, but eh. Gerald woke to a sea of flesh, writhing and moving in the shadows. The entire adult population of Kinderwood had relocated to the old steel mill to better worship their new and slender god with the carnality of their lust, with the passion of their lewdness. They had left their inhibitions, their egos, their fears and self-consciousness in a rough pile near the door along with the clothing they'd shed, and arranged themselves around the mill's floor in couplings of various combinations and number. The slender man moved around among the crowd like a stark spectre, caressing a flank here, stopping to watch a particularly perverse act there. Occasionally he would pick someone up with his tentacles and reposition them, or move them to a new grouping, or just take them and leave. He seemed to gain sustenance from their wild lust, but made no other effort to communicate or direct them. Gerald had come to Kinderwood with his assistant, Marla, lost somewhere in that passionate ocean of skin, to investigate the source of the Slender Man meme. He suspected a truth behind the figure, but nothing like this. Nothing so immediate, so real. He certainly hadn't expected to be taken by the creature, to have his ego peeled away from his soul, to be fucked by the Slender Man's tentacles. He hadn't expected to give himself over, body and soul, to an urban legend. He hadn't expected to discover that the creature had turned the entire town into his own personal orgy cult. He walked past 3 men holding down and fucking a fourth, not struggling, but lovingly accepting every cock offered to him in whatever way he could take it, and briefly considered joining them. It was morning, though, and he had to acquire sustenance if he was to keep fucking. He didn't know why the Slenderman wanted them all to fuck, just that he did, and that was enough for Gerald. The Slenderman was his god, his master, his lover, his reason to live. A small part of his mind, a tiny screaming part in the back of his skull, knew that this was some sort of artificial love, some diabolic mind control, but he didn't care. In the Slender Man's embrace, he had reason. He had purpose. He had clarity of thought and strength of vision. And that vision was fucking. He made his way to the mill's small staff kitchen. While the countertops were rotten with age and disrepair, the ancient refrigerator worked, and the pantries were kept stocked. He pulled out a bowl of grape nuts, poured himself a bowl, added milk, and crunched away. A woman ran screaming to the kitchen, waving her hands, followed shortly after by a burly bear of a man. "Oh, no!" she half-laughed. "You've cornered me! Whatever will you do?" The beefy man chuckled. "Gonna have my way with you, slut!" She turned away, hand held up to her lips, batting her eyes over her shoulder and jutting her hips out towards her pursuer. "Oh, no! Not that, mister!" Joel took another bite of cereal, watching the man's cock stiffen and feeling his own cock harden in response. The man gave Gerald a wink and approached the girl, massive cock swaying in the breeze. He grabbed her wrists and pulled them back forcefully, and she yelped, rubbing her ass against his crotch. "Oh, no! Please don't," she said. "You're mine now, bitch!" He spun her around towards the staff table and slammed her down across it so hard that Gerald's bull jumped. He reached out to steady it. The woman grunted and pushed back against her attacker as he slid his huge cock into her pussy with one smooth thrust. "Help me," she called mockingly to Gerald. "Please, sir, this brute is fucking me. Please help." "You want to fill this bitch's mouth up?" the man asked, thrusting hard into her hips. "Okay." Gerald stood, putting his cereal on the counter. "But you gotta fuck me next." "Deal." The woman pouted. "Oh, but I wanted your cum." She was cut off as Gerald stuffed his hard cock between her lips. "You'll get what I give you," the burly man said, resuming his thrusting with vigor. Gerald held the woman by the jaw, keeping her steady on his cock, as she was rocked forward by Burley's slamming. Since he'd first discovered the homosexual side of his libido a year ago, he hadn't really had much of an urge to fuck women. But under the Slender Man's erotic influence, gender had become almost meaningless. A mouth was a mouth was a mouth, an orifice was an orifice, and 3 fingers up his ass was almost as nice as a cock. He still preferred to be the one fucked, but he wasn't a selfish lover. He He could give as well as he got. The girl between him and the other man was blissed out, filled with their cocks, helpless between the power of their thrusting. It was a helpless, submissive bliss that Gerald himself loved, and that was an extension of what the Slender Man's sex cult was offering. It didn't take long for the woman to come, trembling and moaning around his cock. The burly man pulled out, his dick still rigid. He stepped aside, away from the table. "Your turn, fucker! Clean this bitch off my cock." Gerald was eager to comply, dropping to his knees before the big man, licking and slurping at his broad cock, tasting the woman's pussy, tasting her pleasure in his pre-cum. She was still out of it, draped across the table, breathing slowly, eyes closed. Looking at the cock before him, he could see why. It was big. He wanted it in his ass. Deep. "Fuck me!" "Don't gotta ask me twice." The man pushed Gerald down to his knees and elbows, his ass up in the air. The thick cock spread Gerald's asshole apart, slowly. Despite the hard fuckings he'd been receiving regularly as part of the Slender Man's cult, the man's massive dick was still almost more than he could handle, and Gerald had to grit his teeth against the erotic ache that spread him from his point of entry. The thick cock penetrated him deeply, filling him until he could feel the man's swollen balls against his own. "You take it good, my little bitch," the man said. "Give it to me, Daddy," Gerald whimpered. "Fuck yeah, I will." The man, whose name Gerald had no interest in knowing, started fucking him, hard. He tingled a meaty fist in the back of Gerald's short hair, pulling his head back as he fucked him, and the tiny pain made Gerald even harder. The man rode his ass, pumping into him mercilessly, without concern for his comfort or pleasure. That was the kind of dominant selfishness that really turned the journalist on. "Fuck, fuck, 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 fuck," Gerald chanted in time with every thrust, a tiny prayer to the Slender One. He could feel the man in his ass getting close, and Gerald did his best to squeeze the man's cock with his ass. The sudden pressure pushed his fucker over the edge, and the man came with a roar, hot cum flooding into his well-fucked rectum. The man pulled out as soon as he finished spasming, turning from Gerald without another word, leaving him sprawled on the floor. His ass leaking cum and his cock still rock hard, Gerald finished his cereal before heading back into the mill's main floor. As people woke to a new day, the orgy had grown in intensity and scope. The Slender Man had departed to bring more participants to get supplies, who knew? But his absence hadn't slowed things down much. This was the hard part, the difficult choice of which orgy to get involved with. Before him was a never-ending banquet of carnal pleasure, and all he had to do was pick someone to start fucking. To his left was a buff man with a pair of girls kneeling in front of him, facing away. He was alternating between their pussies, sticking his cock first in one, then the other. They seemed to be enjoying it, but he could probably use a second cock to help him carry his load. Beyond them he saw a daisy chain forming, mouths on cocks and pussies. More were joining up all the time, and the line was already the length of the mill. Gerald could easily grab a dick and start sucking and join in the electric connection of mouths and genitals. To his right he saw the burly man from before on his knees sucking the cock of a thinner but reasonably endowed fellow. Turnabout was a fair play. Gerald could walk up to him and vigorously sodomize him. He really wasn't much of a top, though. A cool hand wrapped around his cock. He looked down and was surprised to see the intern who he had taken on for the assignment to look into the Slender Man mythos. "Marla," he said, "I didn't know you were here." A frown crossed her lips as she continued to pump his cock. "You just disappeared on me, boss. I didn't know what to think." "Well, you know." He thrust his hips, fucking her fist a little. "You get your mind blasted by an alien fuck god and you lose track of things." She laughed. "Oh, trust me, I'm well aware. I can't believe I ran from this." Her cool lips wrapped around his turgid cock. "I know, right?" he said. "This is so much better than free will." She made a sound around his cock that was most likely a scent. Movement above the crowd caught Gerald's eyes, and he saw that their god, the Slender Man, had returned and was moving through the crowd. He towered above them, a tall and impossibly figure, his tentacles trailing behind, caressing and stroking. This wasn't his true form. It was too simple. He wondered if they would ever get to look upon their god's actual face, if they could stand it, if the purity of its truth would burn their eyes away. It would be worth it just to see him. The sight of the Slender Man invigorated Gerald, and he grabbed a hold of Marla's hair, thrusting his hips, fucking her mouth. She gave a little whine of protest and surprise at first, but relaxed into him, letting his cock slide into her mouth and throat. The closer the Slender Man moved towards him, the more fiercely he fucked Marla's face. It wasn't lust. It was to drown out the screaming in the back of his head, the small voice that tried to tear him from the love of his god. "Hmm?" Marla protested. Bug Gerald's eyes and attention were on the tall figure heading in their direction. It barely registered on him when he came, so entranced was he with the unnatural form and the jerky way with which it glided across the mill's floor. Marla noticed, coughing and sputtering as the cum shot into her throat. "Jesus fuck, Gerald, what's got into—" She stopped as she saw his slenderness pass by. One of his tentacles drifted past in his passing, and Gerald impulsively reached out and took a hold of it. The Slender Man stopped, turning slowly towards him. "Please," Gerald whispered. "Please, sir, let me pleasure you." The Slender Man didn't respond or outwardly react as Gerald began to stroke the tentacle like a massive cock, licking at its head, kissing the tip. He didn't know if the Slender Man could feel it, or if it was an erogenous zone, or if this did anything for him. But it was what came naturally to him. He sucked and stroked it tenderly, lovingly. Marla watched him for a second in almost awe before picking up a second tentacle and following suit, rubbing it against her breasts, between her legs. "Please," she added, adding her voice to his. "Please." The others nearby followed suit, reaching out, touching, caressing, stroking, fucking themselves with his tentacles. The Slender Man seemed almost at a loss, standing among his servants, unmoving while they stroked and caressed his tentacles. More and more of the orgiasts were making their way over to their god, hands extended. Those who couldn't find purchase on his tentacles instead clung to his torso, his core, kissing and caressing. Perhaps belatedly he tried to shake them off, tried to move away, but the combined weight of the Kinderwood's adult population and the insatiable pull of their lust was too much for him. Those along his tentacles could feel them swell and tremble, and knew their god was coming close to orgasm. Gerald pulled the tip of the Slender Man's tentacle out of his mouth. "Come! Come for us, O great and slender god! Give us your pleasure! Give us your cum!" Other voices joined his plea, their voices rising like a tide to fill the mill floor. The tentacle grew firm and hot in Gerald's hands, almost too hot to bear, but he tightened his grip around it and clamped down with his lips. A great light erupted from the Slender Man, followed by an orgasmic cry that sounded like an echo of the Big Bang, and the tentacles each snapped into a sudden stiff rigidity, bucking those who were holding them away several yards to tumble naked across the floor. Those were the lucky ones. Those closer, those holding the tentacles near their base or clinging to his holy body, were incinerated by the light of pure bliss that accompanied the Slender Man's orgasm. The concussive force of the raw, sensual explosion blew out the mill's windows, knocking the townsfolk further away and knocked Gerald useless. Gerald returned to awareness with a profound sense of loss. He rolled onto his back and knew for certain that the Slender Man had left them. Maybe he'd had his fill. Maybe he'd been destroyed. All Gerald knew was that he no longer felt his presence. The phantom tendril that had been controlling the pleasure and lust centers of his brain had gone, leaving behind only a void and shame. All around Gerald, the citizens of Kinderwood were shakily standing, averting their gazes, remembering what they'd done, and being horrified with it. Without the Slender Man's influence, their life, sexual repressions, and morals had returned with a vengeance, were crashing destructively against the memory of the lustful deeds done in the mill. Some couldn't handle it and wept or retched with rage. Others simply ignored it for now, not looking at anyone, instead collecting their clothing from a pile and numbly departing the mill. He turned, spotting his intern, who sat against a giant cast-iron vat. "Marla, don't. Don't talk to me. Go." He turned, walking nude from the mill. His clothes weren't here. There was nothing left here for him, not even a story. He couldn't tell it. He couldn't tell anyone without destroying the people of Kinderwood, and who'd believe it anyway. He wasn't processing it. Not yet. He knew that much. Maybe he'd deal with it when he was home, when he was safe, when he could understand exactly how he had felt about being used by an alien thought god. Maybe he'd just get drunk and try to forget about it. He was just glad he didn't live here. He watched the people of Kinderwood as they crept shamefully from the mill, back to their homes, back to their forgotten lives, and was instantly glad that he could just turn his back on all of this and leave. And that's it. That's the last of Slenderotica. I hope you guys enjoyed. I very much apologize for laughing and stuttering my way through, but I'm sorry. I can't really take this too seriously. Again, if you want to purchase Slenderotica for yourself, you can find it on the Amazon Kindle store. I will link it. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good night.